Okay, 6.2 is the equation of a line in standard form. You've never seen, you've seen lines in that form before, but we've never really talked about how they make sense and things like that. Basically, the concept is that you can say something in two different ways and it mean the exact same thing, right? I could say, Emily has a lot of friends. Or I could say, there are a lot of people who consider Emily their friend. Means the same thing, said two different ways. Exactly what we're working on here with converting from slope-intercept form to standard form and back again. So y equals mx plus b, I can represent that line in the form ax plus by plus c equals 0 as well. So here we go. We're going to take a few notes at the top of our page. Standard form for the equation of a line is capital A times x plus capital B times y plus c equals 0. Now what do we call c in this situation? Because it doesn't have a variable attached to it. It's the constant. And what we have here is a polynomial. Okay, it has two variables in it. A, B, and C are going to be numbers that we know already. Okay, so let's take a note on that. So standard form for the equation of a line is ax plus by plus c equals 0, where A, comma, capital B, and capital C are integers. That means they're positive or negative whole numbers, or they could be 0 in that case if they're integers. Except here's another guide for us, and capital A and capital B are not both 0. Okay, let's talk about that for a second. What would happen if capital A was 0?
Then x would be 0.
Then this whole term, not everything, just this whole term would be 0. Okay? That's fine, because it still leaves us with one variable. What would happen if B were 0?
Then it would just be e equals 0.
What if just B were 0 and A was not 0?
Then it would be that.
Then we would
whole
still
concept.
have an x term. We would not have a y term, but that's fine. We still have one variable that we could solve for. Now what would happen if A and B were both 0?
Then you wouldn't have an
You
x
would have an x term or a y term.
There would be no variables, no x, no y. We would just have c equals 0. Well, what if c was 7? Then we'd have 7 equals 0. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, so it can't work that way.
You would have no
So the rules are A, B, and C are integers, and A could be 0, and B could be 0, but not both of them. Okay? Not both of them, and it would still be standard form. C could be 0, yep. There's no rule there. C is the constant. If it were 0, it would just be ax plus by equals 0. And
So
that's
C
fine
is
too.
the y-intercept.
Okay? Now, one of the keys to standard form is it always equals 0. Okay? So you might get a problem that says express this line, or whatever, this equation in standard form. Let's say it was something real simple like 7y equals 7. Okay? It doesn't say solve for y, it says express in standard form. Standard form always equals 0. So watch what I would do. I would just subtract 7 from both sides, and that would give me 7y minus 7 equals 0. Okay, regroup. In standard form, the coefficient of the x term is always positive. So that means when we're writing it like this, you'll never start with a negative number. Okay? If you're doing your math and it ends up with a negative number, you're going to have to do one more step to make sure this term is not negative. And that does. If this coefficient is negative, you can multiply both sides, because we have to do the same thing to both sides if we're going to do anything. You can multiply both sides, and then in brackets I'm going to put every term. So it doesn't mean just one of the terms on each side, it means every term on each side. Multiply both sides by, do you guys know how to get rid of a negative sign in front of something?
Positive.
Multiply it by a negative, but we don't want to change the value of the number,
Oh,
so we have to multiply by negative
One.
1. Okay, multiply by negative 1. Good.
The coefficient, is that the final answer? Like
Coefficient is just the number that is in front of the variable.
Yeah, I remember that.
Good. For example, we have, let's say you've done some math or you're given a line and it's negative 3x plus 4y minus 7 equals 0. And you think, oh, it equals 0. It's got an a, a b, and a c, and an x, and a y. I must be done. But then you think, actually my coefficient of my x term can't be 0. So watch what happens. I'm going to put that whole thing in brackets.
Run over here.
You mean can't be negative?
Can't be negative, right?
It's 7 minus.
Let's just not rush ahead. Okay? And I'm going to multiply this side by negative 1. And if I do that, I have to multiply this side by negative 1. On this side, real easy. 0 times anything is 0.
So you never need.
So it didn't actually change that side at all.
So really, you're
Okay.
only changing.
Watch what happens on this side though. Because I'm going to distribute this negative 1 to each of the terms in my trinomial.
Others you're gonna get negative.
All of the signs are going to
Oh.
swap. So we've got, instead of negative 3x, we have positive 3x. Instead of positive 4y, we have negative 4y.
Positive sign.
And instead of negative 7, we have positive 7.
So like a
Now this line, this equation, is exactly the same as this equation, but we've expressed it with a positive coefficient in front of our x term. Okay? Exact same line. Now this is standard form. This one is not standard form because it has a negative in front. Example 1. In example 1, we are converting from standard form to slope y-intercept form. Okay? So why would we want to do this? Well, because lots of times you're given a line in standard form, but it's difficult to graph the line from standard form. Okay? It's also difficult to, for instance, if you know what x is, to solve for y in standard form, but it's a lot easier from slope y-intercept form, which is what we're more familiar with. So our goal is to get this guy looking like y equals mx plus b. Okay? So right now, x and y and the constant are all on the same side. What do we want to do?
Get y over all by itself.
Okay, so we want to isolate, take your notes, isolate y on one side. Does it matter which side I isolate y on?
No.
It doesn't matter at all. Okay? At the end, I'll swap it to the left regardless. But it doesn't
Still an
matter what
equation.
side. It's still an equation. It means the same thing.
What does this have to do with anything we learned just before? Like it was
What does this have to do with like yesterday's and previous
Like what
lessons?
we just learned here because we flipped all this.
So
We used
the
that
notes
as
that
well.
you took was learning about standard form.
Oh.
So now we're given something in standard form, and you understand that because it's got ax plus by minus c plus c equals 0.
We have to
So
convert
it's
it.
in standard form because it equals 0,
Yeah.
and the coefficient in front of x is positive number. It's 1, right? A is 1, B is 1, C is negative 3. Maddie,
Would you ever have it that it wouldn't like say it would equal like 4 or something?
would that be standard form?
No, I know it wouldn't be, but like how would you change it back?
You
into
could
standard?
get a line. So we actually did one of those already, but you could get a line that, or an equation that is equals something on that side. If you get blah 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 equals 4, then you just subtract 4 from both sides. And on this side you'll have blah 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 minus 4, and on this side you'll have 0. Okay?
Continue, sir.
Thank you. Good questions. So I want to isolate y. So I want to get y by itself. Well, there's two ways to do it really. One way is I could subtract, don't write this, I could subtract y from both sides and I'd be done. I'd have isolated y, but then I wouldn't be in y equals mx plus b, I'd be negative y equals that. And that's a bit tricky. I'd have to do the whole multiply every term by negative 1. I don't want to do that. So rather than move y, what am I going to move?
X.
X and 3.
Okay, so I'm going to subtract x from both sides, and I'm going to add 3 to both sides. Alright, so on the left here, I'm just left with y. And on the right, I have 0 minus x plus 3. Well, that's just minus x plus 3. Now, don't be confused here. In y equals mx plus b form, it's okay to have a negative in front of the x. What does that mean?
M is
It
negative
just
1.
means the slope is negative 1. Okay? So this is a line that goes through 0, 3, has a y-intercept of positive 3, and a slope of negative 1. Now, did you know that when you looked at this?
No.
No. It's the same line, though. Now we know what it looks like.
It should be.
Okay? So let's write that note.
Where does
The
0 go?
So
y-int
it would go down
is
1. and then
3,
The Y-int.
Oh, yeah.
y-int, y-intercept. The slope is negative 1.
Mr. Reed, you just got rid of the 0, Kyle.
0 is 0, so that's
Yeah,
not a problem.
It's still valid, no?
Yep. What's 0 plus 4? What's 0 plus Jacob? Actually, it's
Jamal.
orange juice.
Orange.
Okay. Make sense? 0 plus anything is just that thing, so I don't need to write it. Alright, B. B is a little bit trickier. It's going to be a couple more, it's going to be another step. We've got x plus 2y minus 4 equals 0. Are we in standard form?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. I've got a positive coefficient in front of my x, and I have it equals 0, and I want to get it in y equals mx plus b. So what is my goal?
To isolate.
Isolate
Y.
Y.
But first,
Isolate
get rid of
Y.
2.
Oh, careful.
Careful, careful.
Oh,
careful.
These guys are glued together pretty tight,
Get rid of everything.
so I want to strip everything else away first.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? So I'm going to subtract x from both sides,
4.
and I'm going to add 4 to both sides. And then I'll just write that step. I have 2y on the left, got negative x plus 4 on the right. Okay? So step 1, you can write this. You're going to subtract x and add 4 on both sides.
And then could you do minus 2?
Careful. How are these connected?
Division.
They're-
Multiplication.
So I have to undo it by using the opposite operation.
Division.
So watch what happens. If I divide this side by 2, I have to divide this
The whole
whole
thing by-
side by 2.
We learned about this one.
Okay? So on the left, I just have y equals, and on the right,
You get-
I've got, and by the way, I'll rewrite it. I'll rewrite it one way, and then I'll simplify it. So I've got negative x plus 4 divided by 2. Basically what that means is we've created a group in the numerator, and we're dividing by 2. Well, what's the same as dividing by 2?
Half.
Multiplying by a half. So really what I'm doing here is I'm dividing both of these terms, each of them, by 2, which is the same as multiplying each of them by a half. So again, I'll do it in 2 steps, but this is the same as 1/2 times this group. Okay? I got this group divided by 2. That's the same as the group times a half, just like the chocolate bar we talked about earlier. Alright? Now look at what happens. I'm not done simplifying it yet. It's not in y equals mx plus b yet. Okay? It's in some number times a binomial. So now I distribute. I end up with 1/2 times negative x, which is negative 1/2 x, plus 4 times 1/2.
Wait, are you distributing?
4 times 1/2 is 4 divided by 2 is just 2. Yes, we've distributed it, so you can draw your arrows if that's helpful for you. Okay, so we're distributing the 1/2 to the first term
But would you not keep it like what we did
and 1/2 to the second term.
we're not.
Now this one is done. What is the y-intercept?
Just positive two.
Y-intercept is 2. The slope
Is 1 over 2. 1/5, half 2.
Negative.
Negative half.
negative 1 over 2 or negative 0.5. Same answer.
So,
Okay?
okay, so if you say that divided
Here we
by
go.
two-
One more. Again, it's just getting a little bit more challenging. It's getting a little bit more challenging, but what is our goal?
To get y
Yeah,
by
3
itself.
isolate y.
Isolate y. Now let's talk about it first. Don't say it out loud. Think about how are you going to do that? What are going to be your steps? We're going to write our steps down first and then we'll do it. Okay? Think about it. Double check your mind and your answer. If you're not sure, double check the previous example that we did. Okay? Who would like to share? Jaden, give us one of the things that has to happen.
You have to divide 6x.
Why
Because it's multiplied together.
Yeah, but it's
So
not.
then you get
It's not
X
attached.
I don't need to separate this.
Oh, then
I'm
you add
isolating
15.
what?
Then you add
Okay, so one of the things that we're going to do is add 15 to both sides.
How would you know to add 15?
Because right now, the y, yeah, it's attached to the 3, but I can't do that yet.
Yeah.
It's actually attached to negative 3. It's also attached on the same side as negative 15. And I want to get y all by itself. I want to isolate it
Okay.
by itself on one side. So I'm going to strip stuff away from it. One of the things I need to do to get 0 here is to add 15. If I'm going to add 15 to this side, I have to add 15 to that side. Who can tell me the other thing that we're going to do?
Subtract 6x.
We're going to subtract 6x.
It's fine, because they're attached.
No,
Stop.
no, you don't.
Yeah, but you don't want to separate 6
I want
and
y
x.
by
You take away
itself.
from that side of the equation. It's only hard to divide.
Okay, I'm not splitting apart 6 and x. I'm just getting them off the side where the y is.
Yeah,
Okay.
so y by itself. Come on, dude.
Okay, here we go. Let's do it. Plus 15 plus 15 minus 6x minus 6x.
It's like back in the day.
Now look at what happened already here on the right. 15 minus 6x. I can just, what I've written as far as what I'm doing, that's actually what the right side should look like. Okay? Could I write it like this? Negative 6x plus 15?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes,
of course.
yes.
Okay, I'm just not because it's nice to not have a negative in front. But I'm going to swap it around after because I'm going to be in y equals mx plus b. But for now, we'll leave it like that. Okay,
so
what's
negative-
left on the left side?
Negative 3.
Just negative 3y. Good. My next step, don't just think about it first. Who's got an idea? Close.
Multiply?
Divide
3. No, plus 3.
both sides.
By 3.
I'm going to just stop you before I write it. Think again. This is negative 3 times y. How do I get y by itself? I'm going to divide by this
3,
number.
Negative 3.
Okay? So we're going to divide both sides by negative 3. So this side divided by negative 3, and this whole side divided by negative 3.
How would you get the answer?
Okay? Over here, it's easy. The negative 3's cancel out. They become 1, right? Anything over itself is just 1, so we're left with y. On the right side, it looks tricky, but look back to what we did last time. We said that both of these parts are a group, And if you're dividing the whole group by -3, that means you're dividing both terms by -3. So what happens when you take 15 divided by -3?
-5.
You get -5. What happens when you take -6x divided by -3?
Negative
Positive
Positive
2x.
Positive
See,
2x.
talking about all like up
the
there.
last problem
Okay.
we did, we used the distributive property. Can we do that with this one or no?
That's
Yep,
because we
you
had
could.
two.
I just skipped that step because it's that step I only showed you so that you could understand what's
Show
happening.
it here.
Wait, no. Could
I
we
will
use that
and I'm
for
done.
two?
So here we go. Now it's still not in y equals mx plus b. These terms need to be rearranged. Be careful when you do that. Don't lose. Remember, the sign stays with the term that follows it. So we have 2x minus 5. And that's done. That's our equation of a line in y equals mx plus b. Example 2. Identify fixed and variable costs in a partial variation. What does it mean that it's a partial variation?
It doesn't start at 0.
It does not go through the origin. It doesn't start at 0, 0. It means there's two parts to the right side of the equation. It means there's a fixed cost and a variable cost. So on your test, it was the gym membership was $12 plus $2 per visit. $12 fixed cost per month plus $2 times the number of times that you visit. Okay? So here we go. The celebrations banquet hall uses the equation 25n minus c plus 1250 equals 0 to determine the cost for the hall rental. C represents the cost in dollars, which depends on n, the number of people attending. Now, this form of the equation, it's in standard form. Is that helpful in this situation if c is the cost and n is the number of people? Is it helpful that they're on the same side of the equation? It's not.
No.
Okay? I want to find out what the cost is, and I know I have 100 people. I want C on one side and everything else on the other side. Okay? That would be converting to slope y-intercept form. So we're doing exactly what we did in example 1, but now with a real-life situation. So here we go. A says, express the equation in slope y-intercept form, and it tells you how it should be. C equals m times n plus b. Well, let's go and I'm going to rewrite the original. 25n minus capital C plus 1250 equals 0. Now, before we do it, I'm going to ask you some questions. Now that you know how it works, can you tell me what the initial cost of the hall is, no matter how many people you have?
You can't see.
I can see.
Oh, sorry, folks. What's the initial cost of the hall, no matter how many people you have? And don't call it out. Think about it. Jacob?
1,000.
Good. The initial cost is going to be $1,250. How much does it cost per person on top of that?
25.
$25. Okay?
So what does C equal?
C is the total cost, but look at what happens.
I thought C was the constant.
Uh,
Hush, baby.
Okay, yes, good. We've already inserted variables, though, to represent our word problem. So we have the cost and the number of people already put into our equation. That's why the question said 25n minus c plus 1250 equals 0, where c represents the cost and n is the number of people
Why would
attending.
they do n for the
Okay?
Number.
Because the word number starts with n.
Uh,
Okay, here we go. There's two different methods to use. I could isolate C on the left side of the equation, or I could isolate C on the right side of the equation. Which one do you think is going to be easier in this case?
C on the left side.
Put C
Right.
on the left?
Right.
No.
Oh, right.
No.
I'm going to put C on the right,
Yes.
okay? So in order to do that, I'm just going to add C to both sides.
It would be 0 plus c.
So now we have 25n plus 1250 equals what? 0 plus c?
C.
c.
equals C.
It's just C.
0 plus C. Start with 0 and you add C, you'll have C, I promise. Okay?
I didn't say that.
Good.
No, I was
Not too difficult. That's really easy in this case. And then you wouldn't really leave it like that, guys. For your final answer, you would rewrite it with C on the left.
Oh, yes.
So we don't have to find
Okay.
out anything here?
No, we did.
In A, we rearranged our equation to be in slope y-intercept form. Now, I'm going to redo it. I'm going to redo it on the left so that you can just see how it works. So if you have space, which you do, go ahead and copy this down. You've got 25n minus c plus 1250 equals 0. And this time I'm going to isolate my c on the left. So in order to do that, I'm going to subtract 25n from both sides. And I'm going to subtract 1250 from both sides.
Then you just
Careful.
What is that with?
So on the left, I'm left with
Negative C.
negative c. And on the right, I have negative 25n minus 1250.
What about that n that stays like this?
Oh, then this is where you times it by negative
No
1.
n's stayed there, Sam. If you have 25 and you take away 25, you're left with 0. Okay, you're getting your subtraction
where
and
you-
division mixed up.
Is this where you times it by negative 1?
Ah, this is where we have to multiply every term, multiply both sides by negative 1. Okay, another way to think about that, guys, I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to divide both sides by negative 1.
You have to be with that one?
Yes, because no.
But it's my negative 1, so it's going to just be positive.
So all that does is change the sign, right? Negative divided by a negative is a positive, and anything divided by 1 is just itself. And then both of these terms are going to get divided by negative 1. So negative 25n divided by negative 1 becomes positive 25n.
Plus.
And negative 1250 divided by negative 1 becomes
Plus
positive 1250. Did we get a different answer or the same?
Uh,
Same. Good.
Different.
Carry on. B. Identify the fixed and variable costs.
well, 1250 is a fix.
The variable is 25.
Yep, but if I just write 25, yeah, it has to be 25 per person.
Oh yeah, because the number of people.
That's what makes it variable, right? Good. You guys are doing well. C says illustrate the relation graphically. I'm not going to do that. I'll show you that on Desmos after maybe. And then D says what is the rental cost if 100 people attend?
Well, so now we can put it all together.
What am I going to do?
Okay, so
Sub
the
in
100
100 over for n.
N
First.
equals 100. Okay, sub n equals 100. That's going to give us the cost. C equals 25 times 100 plus 1250.
Minus.
25 times 100
2,500
plus 1250.
is 3,750.
How much money we need?
No. Wait, doesn't
The cost
Yeah, see?
to rent the hall for 100 guests
We find per person?
is
Wait, Mr. E, don't the people have to pay?
3,750. If you were arranging the ball, maybe you would get the people to pay. But this is how much the hall is going to charge you. The cost of renting the hall, if you're going to have 100 people at your event, is going to be $3,750.
I would definitely charge.
All right, let's quick do our key concepts here. The equation of a line can be expressed in different ways. Standard form looks like what?
ax plus by plus c equals
I cannot even read that at all.
Okay? And we're always remembering that A has to be positive and A and B can't both be 0. Okay? Good. Slope y-intercept form.
Y equals mx plus b.
Good. So, by tomorrow, you should have absolutely memorized both of these forms, and you should be able to comfortably swap between the two using basic algebra skills. Okay? Rearranging
By
equations.
tomorrow.
Absolutely. By tomorrow. 100%.
By tomorrow.
Okay? You can convert an equation in standard form to y-intercept form by
Dividing.
Rearranging.
Rearranging.
rearranging. When you rearrange what's in your closet, you don't actually change what's in your closet. You just move it around.
Well,
Okay?
sometimes you purchase.
Make sure
That
you
would
put
not be
all
rearranging.
sides.
That would be
The only
cleaning
way
out.
I rearrange my closet.
Okay, your practice problems are just the worksheet on page 12 of your notebook. Please take your time. If you think you have, no, you don't have space there to do it, so do it in a separate notebook, please.
Can you
Do it
one
neatly,
quick?
and I might do a couple to help you.